what's going on is I've realized three things, which one is there's this treadmill that we are all on, and it's the treadmill of hiring, right? So you do the maths, it's very simple. If you're growing 15, 20% CAGR, if your attrition is 15, 20%, essentially we're hiring 1/3 of our workforce every year. It's enormous. It's just enormous. And you think about all the interviewing that you have to do, the offer, roll out the offers, convince a reluctant person to join you versus your competitor, and then you onboard them. And oh, by the way, you've got to somehow meet the numbers and deliver the quarter. There's almost nothing left. There's no bandwidth left in our organizations for doing things like leadership development and so on and so forth. So that's one issue. The second issue that's going on is, and again, about 990 out of 1,000 companies
relates to HR, needs to modify to a more behavioral understanding and a more focus on behavioral economics. It's interesting that I read recently that in 2009, the Nobel Prize for Economics was given to a psychologist. And maybe HR should also start looking at how behavioral economics talks about how people should actually be motivated.
Because the question in a life insurance contract is, if a customer wants to stick with the sale, yes, a disproportionate value is created by the salesperson, but a large part of the reason that a customer stays with it is also the servicing that he or she gets, right? And the extent of that service support. So should I only incentivize sales or should I incentivize the unit or the branch is another question in my mind.
That's an interesting discussion actually. Do either of you have experiences in terms of how you've seen things change when you have individual specific incentive plans vis-a-vis more group, business, team-based incentive plans?
If you peel back your description, there was a lot of things in there that I think are critical in the determination of an effective incentive plan. So if you look at it from an individual standpoint, right, the more clarity you have about what you need to do to be successful, the more impactful the incentive is. Having said that, you can't pick the wrong measure, because sometimes these measures are stupid, right? So we hear all the stories around, we can increase volume if you want us to, but we lower the quality, right? That happens what happened in the mortgage crisis, right? All they wanted was more mortgages. Well, they got them. And then, of course, that's what happened with the problem. And they were incenting people literally to close more mortgages. That was the only criteria they were looking at. So that's one very important point. So how do you get the portfolio? You have to somehow introduce the portfolio of its quantity and quality. The second point you made, which I thought was an excellent one, is sort of the shared responsibilities, because very few of these positions can impact the whole relationship with the customer by themselves. And so how do we make everybody sort of share in the results of.
And that movement happens. Then it goes to employer contributes, which is somewhere where we are. And then the employer facilitates, and the employee actually picks up the cost. This is the place where the employer is just acting as a medium to provide it to you, and then you move it forward. And finally, the super basket, which we call as the supermarket, which completely on that. Overall wage was actually in the 20s are the places where the attrition were lowest. So maybe they are actually doing the stuff complete to what the employee is asking, and hence able to hold on to people. So that's the other part that we've seen from the employee preference. The next part, what we said, this is not complete, right? Maybe the employees are saying.
So these 250,000 employees or 250,000 plus employees who didn't have a head of compensation, who are, as you know, I would not say they're poorly paid, but they are just paid about average, right? There are no incentives as we recognize them in the private sector. There are no rewards, there are no bonuses, there are no dividends, there are no ESOPs. Nothing. And yet somehow these people were able to work magic during that period. And I was there during that period, and at that time I did not know what I did. I'm just building up the context what I tried to do in State Bank of India. This is just by hindsight that maybe there were some of these things in my head. How many of you have heard about Maslow's theory? Quite a large number actually, nearly half of you.
Right, so most of you would be familiar with this quote from the movie When Harry Met Sally, right? This was way back in 1989. For almost 2 decades now, or at least as long as I can remember, as consumers, we have been demanding and experiencing customized products and services, right? So whether it was organizations like Dell, for example, that offered modular choices for us to build our own laptops, customized to my choices as an individual, or perhaps organizations like Amazon, right, who began tracking individual preferences and started tailoring offers and promotions to me or to every individual differently, right? So my point here is that if we look around us, organizations are spending huge amounts of money on consumer research in the age group of 10 to 18, and again, very different from women with children greater than 18. In fact, women with children greater than 18 was another demographic for which flexible working arrangements actually fell off the charts, right? So women in the age group of 0 to 10 as expected would have childcare as a top priority and which would fall. I think one interesting point that I want to make here is that while as we look